The Stone Zone, with legendary Republican strategist and political icon and pundit Roger Stone. Stone has served as a senior campaign aide to 3 Republican presidents. He is a New York Times best-selling author and a longtime friend and advisor of President Donald Trump. As an outspoken libertarian, Stone has appeared on thousands of broadcasts, spoken at countless venues, and lectured before the prestigious Oxford Political Union and the Cambridge Union Society. Due to his 4+ decades in the political and cultural arena, Stone has become a pop culture icon. And now, here's your host, Roger Stone.
Welcome, I'm Roger Stone, and yes, indeed, you are back in the Stone Zone. Back in 2013, I wrote a book which became a New York Times bestseller, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. In this book, I made the case that it was Lyndon Johnson at the helm of a conspiracy that included the Central Intelligence Agency, Big Texas Oil, organized crime, the international banks, and others, all of whom had an individual motive for the murder of JFK. Now, a shocking new videotape has emerged that proves that my assertion that the shooter from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building was one Malcolm Wallace. Malcolm Wallace has a longtime association with Lyndon Johnson. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Now, to help break this down, let me bring in my co-host, the editor-in-chief of Slingshot.News, Troy Smith.
Roger, it's always an honor to be back with you in the Stone Zone today.
This is really a historic moment because a piece of audio tape has emerged, which proves the central thesis of my book, that it was Lyndon Johnson at the helm of the plot to kill President John F. Kennedy. Let me kind of give the background here before we roll this amazing piece of tape. This is a conversation between Cliff Carter, who was then the executive director of the Democrat National Committee, longtime political operative for Lyndon Johnson, and Billie Sol Estes. Billie Sol Estes was a flamboyant Texas wheeler dealer who had been kicking back to Johnson for enormous federal agricultural contracts he had received. When Kennedy was killed, Johnson and Sol Estes were under investigation for that very corruption. Sol Estes would go to prison. He would subsequently write in his book that the killer of John F. Kennedy, at least one of them, was Malcolm Wallace. Wallace had been involved in 1951 in the murder of a man who was involved with Lyndon Johnson's sister in a love triangle, a man who was seeking to blackmail Johnson. Let's roll this incredible tape.
It's sure good to see you. How's life treating you today?
Well, Saul, it's been a pretty touch and go situation. Lyndon and I have had quite a few unpleasant words here lately over the deal that he hired Mike Wallace to assassinate the president. It's been hectic in every way, but we've lived through it this far, and I guess we'll continue to do so. Lyndon should have never issued that order to Mike, but we've had our differences, and I'm a true blue to Lyndon, as I've always been, and tried to carry out every order that he'd ever given me. But this is one I'll probably never be able to forget. And the times that we've had in Texas, and the embarrassment that Lyndon had gotten from Kennedy, I guess there wasn't anything else to do but what he did.
Well, you know, Lyndon could have really hit me if he would.
Well, Lyndon's the kind of person that doesn't want to help anyone. He's all for Lyndon, and that's the way he's pretty much always been.
Well, they had me backed up on that Henry Marshall killing, and they just kind of blackmailed me to keep my mouth shut. And if I hadn't had a bunch of tapes that I played after I got killed, because 17 got killed in this situation very mysteriously. And I've done a lot of time, and I've lost a lot of money, and hurt my family a whole lot. And it's really got me just disgusted with Lyndon in one way. In one way, I feel real sorry for him.
So first of all, thanks to Alex Jones and the folks at InfoWars for supplying that tape. This is shocking confirmation from Lyndon Johnson's right-hand man, Cliff Carter, his longtime political operative, that he did, in fact, hire Malcolm Mac Wallace. We know that Wallace was the shooter from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building because he left his fingerprints on the cardboard boxes that comprised the so-called crow's nest from which it was alleged that Lee Harvey Oswald shot. And we know they're his fingerprints because in 1951, Malcolm Wallace had been prosecuted for first-degree murder, as I said, in a situation in which he shot and killed a man in cold blood and in broad daylight on a golf course outside of Dallas, who was trying to blackmail Johnson. This is now shocking confirmation of the facts surrounding my book. Shane Stevens, the man who uncovered this tape, I've asked him to join the show next week. I'm hopeful that he will do so. Folks, you can get my book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, if you want to read about this. You could buy it from Amazon or you could buy it from Barnes & Noble if you want to give money to multinational corporations that hate your guts. But if you want to get an autographed edition, and by the way, you always want the paperback because it has 3 extra chapters, you can go to themanwhokilledkennedy.com, themanwhokilledkennedy.com. It lays out this entire story for you. So that is our breaking news today. And now, Troy, I see that Pam Bondi, the nominee for Attorney General, was on the Hill yesterday. I love the pinstripes. She's going to clearly be not only the most qualified Attorney General, but perhaps the best dressed Attorney General we've ever had.
Well, and Roger, it was an eventful day yesterday on Capitol Hill. And one of our favorites here on the StoneZONE, somebody that we've covered an awful lot, Adam Schiff, really had the guts. And it was really unbelievable to watch, Roger. He had the guts to interject and to attack Bondi during her hearings. And made for TV, Pam Bondi, she decided that she wasn't going to allow that to happen. She wasn't going to be attacked without going back at Schiff, who has overseen the destruction of his own state, who has been involved in many corruption scandals, and even been censored by the House of Representatives. So let's roll Adam Schiff questioning Bondi about investigating Jack Smith. I want to get your thoughts on this, Roger, because this was a focal point of this hearing yesterday. The Democrats in the Senate, they are terrified at the aspect of Bondi investigating Jack Smith. I know you've alluded that there may be crimes committed by Smith outside of his investigation of Trump that may come under investigation. Can you talk about that just after this clip? Let's roll this and get Roger's thoughts.
The president has said Jack Smith should go to jail. Will you investigate Jack Smith?
Senator, I haven't seen the file. I haven't seen the investigation. I haven't looked at anything. It would be irresponsible of me to make a commitment regarding anything without, you're a long practicing attorney, without looking at a file.
So you would need a factual predicate to open an investigation of Jack Smith, is that right?
Not a summary by you sitting here. Yes, sir.
And not a summary by the president either, right?
Absolutely.
So a summary by the president or his desire to investigate Jack Smith would not be enough for you to open an investigation of Jack Smith. Is that right?
I will look at the facts and evidence in any case.
And sitting here,
72%, excuse me,
sitting here today.
Senator, 72% of
Please,
Americans
I only have
have
7
lost
minutes.
faith in the Department of Justice.
Sitting here today, are you aware of any factual predicate to investigate Jack Smith? Sitting here today, yes or no?
Senator, I will look at the facts and the circumstances.
You can't answer that question.
Brought to me.
You're not a part of the department yet. There's no worry about divulging
I'm sitting
law
here as a
enforcement
nominee.
sensitive information. So just tell us,
I'm
are you
sitting here as
aware?
a nominee.
Just tell us, are you aware of a factual predicate to investigate Jack Smith? Yes or no?
Senator, what I'm hearing on the news is
Are you aware of
horrible.
a?
Do I know if he committed a crime? I have not looked
You seem
at it.
reluctant to answer a simple question. Let me ask you a different simple question.
Well, of course, Adam Schiff is well aware of the fact that Judge Eileen Cannon has held that Jack Smith's appointment is entirely unconstitutional, that it violates both the Appointments Clause of the U.S. Constitution and the Appropriations Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Whether Jack Smith has engaged in illegal activity, well, for example, taking the audio recordings of a grand jury proceeding in Washington, D.C., and then playing them for a Florida grand jury, thus giving the Florida grand juries no opportunity to ask questions of the witnesses, yeah, that's highly questionable activity. I'm not a lawyer, but it certainly doesn't smell right to me. Until this matter is investigated, whether there is a basis to prosecute Jack Smith or not could not possibly be ascertained. But look, let's be very candid here. What Adam Schiff is concerned about is himself. Only 2 weeks ago, the Department of Justice of the Biden administration, Inspector General's report says that both Adam Schiff and Congressman Eric Swalwell leaked classified information to various media sources, reporters, in violation of the law. And they said the FBI was aware of that. Now, that is a prosecutable crime. Whether they're going to choose to prosecute that, I have no idea. But what Adam Schiff really is concerned about is himself. This is a man who, as you know, said that he had seen, quote, more than circumstantial evidence of Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. Yet he produced none whatsoever, none. He knew that the Steele dossier, which was the underlying premise for the appointment of Robert Mueller and the entire Russian collusion hoax, was a fraud. He probably also knew that the government has no evidence whatsoever, none whatsoever, that there was an online hack of the Democrat National Committee by Russian intelligence. Sure, the New York Times continues to repeat this over and over again as if it is a fact, but of course it isn't a fact. In fact, all of the forensic evidence and expert analysis would indicate that to the extent that data was clearly stolen from the Democrat National Committee, it was downloaded to some kind of a portable drive and taken out the back door. So what is Adam Schiff's what's he really trying to do here? This is not about Jack Smith, it's about him. What he really wants to know is whether Pam Bondi is going to pursue those who broke the law during the Obama or Biden years. That's my analysis of that.
Well, and Roger, what you're talking about, she brings up this charge, or I shouldn't say charge, but she brings up this fact found by the DOJ that Schiff did leak this classified information. Let's roll Pam Bondi talking about that with Adam Schiff, really giving it back to him and talking about the failures he's had in his own state. Really tremendous display yesterday by Pam Bondi.
Has called for it publicly. You are aware of that, aren't you?
No one has asked me to investigate.
But the president has
We're
called,
also worried about Liz Cheney,
the
Senator.
president has
You know what
called
we
for
should
this.
be worried about?
Ms. Bondi,
The
please
crime rate
answer
in
my
California
questions.
right now
You
is
are aware,
through the roof.
Ms. Bondi,
Your robberies
Ms.
are
Bondi,
87% higher than the national
my question
average.
is this.
That's what I
My
want to
question
be
is
focused
this.
on, Senator.
Do you have the
if I'm
power to
confirmed
say
as
no to the
Attorney
president?
General.
And what you're suggesting today by your non-answer is you don't have the independence to say no to the president. So let me ask you a different question. It also requires you if you're going to be a good attorney general, to be able to tell hard truths to the president. So my questions now are, can you tell hard truths to the president? So let me start with an easy truth that you could speak to the president. Can you tell us, can you tell him that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election? Can you say that? Do you have the independence to say that? Do you have the gravitas, the stature, the intestinal fortitude to say, Donald Trump, you lost the 2020 election? Can you tell us that here today?
Senator, what I can tell you is I will never play politics. You're trying to engage me in a gotcha. I won't do it.
I'm just asking you a simple
I
question.
won't play
If you can
politics
speak truth
with any ongoing
to power.
investigation,
So let me ask you another.
like you did leaking your colleague Devin Nunes's memo.
If you be able to
Ongoing
review
investigation.
hundreds of cases on day one?
I will look at every file I am
Of course
asked
you
to
won't.
look
So
at.
will you advise the president?
Can I
will
answer
you-
the question?
Well, my question
I
is.
would have plenty of staff. You said, of course you want.
You'll be able to review
Listen, I'm
hundreds
not
of
going to
cases on the first day?
mislead this body nor you.
All right, let me ask another question. You don't want to answer that. Let me ask
You were
another question.
censured by
It will
Congress,
also-
Senator, for
it will
comments just
also-
like this that
it
are
will
so reckless.
It will also be.
Boom. This is exactly why Pam Bondi will be a great attorney general. I wish he'd had an opportunity to raise the question of the recent Inspector General's report from the Biden DOJ that showed that both Schiff and Swalwell broke the law. There was a part of this hearing, as I understand it, Troy, where maybe instead of shifty Adam Schiff, we should call him sleepy Adam Schiff. Appears like he actually fell asleep.
Yeah, that's right, Roger. And people were taking videos of him in Congress of him apparently falling asleep during this hearing. And I think this speaks to what's going on in Washington, Roger. You know, we talk so much about the policy. We talk so much about what's happening in the insanity of the liberal policies. But when we get down to the people orchestrating these policies, not only are they unimpressive, but they're completely low energy. And as we see with Adam Schiff here, they can't even make it through a hearing without falling asleep. Let's roll this unbelievable moment. How do you fall asleep on national television? Quite a feat. Let's roll it.
I assume you agree with me that Chinese cyber warfare, espionage, malign influence is an existential threat to America.
Nappy time.
It is an existential threat, Senator, and also I have not seen it yet, but from what I've heard about former FBI Director Wray's comments on 60 Minutes regarding China, sleeper cells within our own country, infiltrating our water systems, our natural gas lines, telecommunications.
There's the sleeper cell.
A very
There's a sleeper cell, Roger. I think that's the line of the day there.
Pretty extraordinary. Here is some breaking news. Governor Ron DeSantis, I think we have a graphic on this. Governor Ron DeSantis has announced that he will appoint Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody to the vacancy created in the Senate by the resignation of Marco Rubio to become Attorney General. Now, normally Rubio's term would run till 2028, but under Florida law, since Rubio resigned early in the term, there will be a special election in November of 2026 to fill that seat. In the interim, Ashley Moody, the sitting Attorney General of Florida, has been appointed to the U.S. Senate. Whether she will run for re-election is unknown. What is known is that hard-charging Congressman Corey Mills has already announced that he will be a candidate for the seat in 2026. Now, Troy, I must tell you, to a certain extent, this could turn out to be a proxy war between Governor Ron DeSantis and President Donald Trump. I am somewhat mystified by the fact that after the beating that Trump administered to DeSantis for the Republican national presidential nomination, that DeSantis did not go out and mend fences by campaigning hard for Trump's election in the general election. I think that's what a smart politician would have done. It's interesting historically that Richard Nixon's hard stumping for Barry Goldwater, who lost, put him in excellent position to win the nomination 4 years later in 1968. In this case, for example, President Trump had a terrific, huge rally in Doral, Florida, and the nomination had been wrapped up by then. Governor DeSantis would have been extremely well received at that rally, but he chose not to come. If you'll go back and examine the words surrounding his withdrawal from the presidential race, he never actually says he endorsed Trump or that he was supporting Trump. And I'm not aware of any speech or event that he attended to help the president over the 2024 finish line. So, first of all, there is the passing up of Lara Trump for this Senate seat. While I think she would be a great U.S. Senator, my greater hope is that she will return to her home state of North Carolina and challenge Rhino Senator Tom Tillis in the Republican primary there for the Senate. She could win that primary. She also could be the only Republican who could win the seat after dispatching Tillis. And I still hope that she will do that. Those advocating for the appointment of Lara Trump, and I certainly would love to have seen that, I think that was the olive branch. That was perhaps what could have been the opening to a rapprochement between Governor DeSantis and President Trump. That still has not happened. So whether the president will support Moody and Moody will run for re-election, or whether the president will back the insurgent candidacy of Corey Mills, we're going to find out. We're going to try to get Corey Mills right here in the Stone Zone next week to talk about this, but he should not be underestimated as a candidate. He's a prodigious fundraiser. He is an indefatigable candidate. This could be setting up as I say, a proxy contest. Remember, DeSantis cannot run for re-election as governor. His term ends in 2026. It is possible that Moody is a placeholder. In other words, she will fill out the next 2 years of the term, but then not run, opening the door for DeSantis to run for the seat himself. I think that's a distinct possibility. It'll be interesting to see today how Attorney General Moody reacts to questions as to whether she's going to run for re-election.
Well, Roger, I wanted to ask you about this because in a 2022 investigation that I launched into Governor Ron DeSantis's reelection campaign, I found that a PAC called Florida Voters in Charge had dispersed hundreds of thousands of dollars to local election supervisors across the state of Florida. And when I traced the money from Florida Voters in Charge, nearly all of it came from the Sands Corporation, which is run by formerly Shel Nadelson, who has passed on, and Miriam Nadelson currently chairs that. And, moving forward, Roger, I just want to ask you, because you've seen this before with Ronald Reagan. In Ronald Reagan's second term, we saw the resurgence of the establishment Republicans you described on this show, how they used Reagan's second term to take over the conservative movement, to co-opt it, and to push us into this era of Bush Sr. And constant foreign wars, and Obama. It led to Obama and all this horrible thing, all the horrible things that we saw. Even John McCain comes out of that. So I want to ask you, what should we be prepared for as America First conservatives going into this next administration? People within the conservative movement that have, say, coalesced around the president, are they still going to have the knives out at the end of the day to shank those of us in the America First movement? Should we let our guard down? How should we prepare for what's coming in this ultimate, what looks like it's going to shake out to be a turf war within the Republican Party that President Trump has won without firing a shot?
Troy, this does not concern me in a very strange way. I think Donald Trump is going to be an even greater president in his new term than he would be if he had been rightfully seated as president in 2020. You can already see the Democrats continuing to use 2020 as a talking point because they think they have persuaded the American people that the 2020 election was not stolen. The polling by Rasmussen, I would urge you over at Slingshot to take a look at this, shows overwhelmingly that the number of people who believe the 2020 election was stolen has so has continually increased to the point where it now is a majority. So the people who believe the 2020 election was not stolen tend to be Democrats who supported Joe Biden. I think that the president in this term or entering this term is far more knowledgeable, much wiser about, first of all, the dynamics within the Republican Party and the fact that there are some Republicans who never happy about his nomination, never happy about his election. They're forced to grimace and pretend they're for him because he's the most popular Republican president in history, surpassing even Reagan in terms of his approval ratings in that regard. And therefore, at the grassroots level of the party, it is deadly to be against Donald Trump. So they have to pretend to be for him, even when they are not. Where I think we're going to be in much better shape is in the appointments process. The president, I think, being not coming from the world of politics, not having any experience in this, when he formed his first administration, he was focused, I think, largely at the positions at the very top, the cabinet secretaries and so on. This time, I know for a fact that he's much more deeply involved, not just looking at who the secretaries of various departments are, but also the deputy assistant secretaries, the assistant secretaries, the general counsels of each department, and also looking at the heads and makeup of individual agencies like the Federal Election Commission, the FCC, the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and other crucial bodies. So I think you're far more likely to get a true America First administration. And believe me, prior support for Donald Trump is a major measure for appointment, which it should be. You need a homogenous team of people who understand that their job is to forward the president's agenda, not to forward the agenda of the rhino wing of the party or the individual agenda of the appointee. You had nominees like H.R. McMaster, who served as the National Security Advisor, or even worse, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly. These people, they've written this, they've said it after they were fired. They thought their job was to delay, dilute, and derail Trump's agenda rather than implement it. You're not going to see that this time, in my opinion.
Well, Roger, there's another thing I want to get your opinion on, and that is something that's making the rounds right now, and that is the fact that House Speaker Mike Johnson has removed Representative Mike Turner as the House Intelligence Chair. Mike Turner had previously accused the GOP of being, quote, infected with Russian propaganda during a CNN appearance in July 2024. We have that appearance. I want to get your opinion because we have the New York Times also accusing Johnson of bowing to Trump on this move. I want to get your thoughts on that and Turner being removed here. Let's roll that clip of him on CNN. Just unbelievable stuff.
Let's turn to Ukraine, an issue that's important to you and your fellow Republican chairman, Michael McCaul, who runs the Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman McCaul made a comment this week about what he says sounds like Russian propaganda from some conservative media and why it's so difficult to explain to Republican voters why supporting Ukraine is important. He told Julia Yaffe, quote, "I think Russian propaganda has made its way into the United States, unfortunately, and it's infected a good chunk of my party's base." He singled out primetime shows on conservative channels. Do you agree with him? And how big is this problem?
Oh, it is absolutely true. We see directly coming from Russia attempts to mask communications that are anti-Ukraine and pro-Russia messages, some of which we even hear being uttered on the House floor. I mean, there are members of Congress today who still incorrectly say that this conflict between Russia and Ukraine is over NATO, which of course it is not. Vladimir Putin having made it very clear, both publicly and to his own population, that his view is that this is a conflict of a much broader claim of Russia to Eastern Europe, and including claiming all of Ukraine territory as Russia's. Now, to the extent that this propaganda takes hold, it makes it more difficult for us to really see this as an authoritarian versus democracy battle, which is what it is. President Xi of China, Vladimir Putin himself have identified it as such. We need to stand up for democracy. We need to make certain that we know that authoritarian regimes never stop when they start an aggression. Ukraine needs our help and assistance now, and this is a very critical time for the U.S. Congress to step up and provide that aid.
It's amazing to me how Chairman McCall, or maybe it's now former Chairman McCall, could be so misinformed. First of all, he says that this is a fight between democracy and authoritarianism. There's no democracy in Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky has outlawed all political parties except for his own. He has arrested everyone who ran against him in the last election. He has shut down newspapers, radio stations, and TV stations that are critical of him. He has arrested journalists who are critical of him. He has banned the single largest church in the country, the Russian Orthodox Church. That doesn't sound very democratic to me. Furthermore, it is not propaganda. It is an indisputable fact that the United States reached an agreement, the Budapest Memorandum, signed for the United States by James A. Baker, Secretary of State, in which we specifically agreed not to push Ukraine into NATO, which is really defined as not putting NATO missiles funded by the United States on the ground in Ukraine pointed at Russia. The silos into which those missiles are to be dropped are already actually built. All they lack is the missiles. Obviously, the bioweapons labs that Victoria Nuland blurted out in a Senate hearing actually exist, is also a violation of that agreement. We yet again agree in the Minsk Accords not to push Ukraine into NATO, which of course is on Russia's border. This idea that the war in Ukraine is about the territorial ambitions of Vladimir Putin, that he's going to swallow up all of Ukraine, then he's going to take Poland, then he's going to take France, then he's going to take Germany. This is absurdity. So it seems to me that the person who has kind of bought into the propaganda regarding this war is former Chairman McCall, who's bought Russian propaganda as to what this war is really about. Now, I understand, having said all those things I just said, that people will say, "Oh, Stone is he's a rollover for the Russians." Look, I had relatives in my family mowed down by Russian tanks in Budapest in 1956. I have no great love for the Russians. Yes, Vladimir Putin is an authoritarian thug. How did that make him different than Volodymyr Zelensky? This war has to end. Most importantly, the killing and the mass murder has to end. I think the highlight of the campaign was the town meeting with Caitlin Collins, when she tried to corner Donald Trump into, well, who do you want to win? Do you want the Russians to win, or do you want the Ukrainians to win? And he said, I want to stop the dying. I want to stop the killing. I think it was one of the high points of the campaign. So look, this is Donald Trump's Republican Party. And those who want to ship billions more to Ukraine, which this current administration is trying to get as much out the door as they can before they lose the keys to the cash box, as it were, they have to recognize that this war is going to draw to a close. And my guess is that Donald Trump, the consummate deal maker, is going to end this conflict relatively quickly with some negotiated settlement. I think that is coming. We already see a situation in the Middle East. You may be more up on this than I do, but yesterday there was an announcement that the hostages of a ceasefire between Israel and their enemies, and that the hostages being held by Hamas would be released. So Trump is not even president yet, and good things are happening for the country.
Well, that's exactly right, Roger. And yet, last night, when President Biden took the stage, his State Department, we covered this on my show yesterday, and we've covered it on Slingshot News as well. The State Department came out with a video, and we're running short on time here, so we're not going to play the full thing. But the State Department essentially said that the Trump administration coming in had a huge part to deal with this. Trump vowed just days ago, Roger, that there would be hell to pay for Hamas if they did not release these hostages. All of a sudden, we see movement. Yet last night in his farewell address, President Biden took credit for what happened in Israel, and he's taking credit for the ceasefire. Now, I think it's important to highlight that this is an opportunity for Americans to come together of Democrat and Republican persuasion. I have not seen the Trump administration, the coming in Trump administration, I haven't seen them disparaging the Biden administration, but what I have seen is the Biden administration last night openly disparaging the Trump administration and attempting to shove them out of the way on what could be a bipartisan accomplishment to move the country forward. It's just disgusting. One of the worst instances we saw last night in Biden's speech of really breaking the mold and destroying standards in the United States was once again attacking the Supreme Court, calling for term limits for our justices and other attacks, also attacking President Trump over the issue of immunity. I want to roll this, Roger, then get your thoughts on this continued attack. We also pulled the clip of Chuck Schumer just a few years ago attacking Supreme Court justices. This is a trend, and it's going in a terrible direction. Let's roll this clip and get your thoughts on Biden's flubs last night.
We need to get dark money. That's that hidden funding behind too many campaigns contributions. We need to get it out of our politics. We need to enact an 18-year time limit, time and term, for the strongest ethics and the strongest ethics reforms for our Supreme Court. We need to ban members of Congress from trading stock while they're in the Congress. We need to amend the Constitution to make clear that no president is immune from crimes that he or she commits while in office. The president's power is not limited. It's not absolute, and it shouldn't be.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
I mean, Joe Biden's at the end of his political career. It's easy to say any of those things. What did he do? Did he push legislation for term limits for members of Congress, for members of the House and Senate? No. He thinks presidents should not be immune from crimes they committed while president. He's got to be laughing about that because, as both president and vice president, the House Oversight Committee has more than documented that money did flow from foreign countries into his pockets through various members of his family. The courts have also held that if a family member is receiving benefits for an official act, that constitutes official corruption and can be prosecuted, even though the money, all of the money, may not have flown to, may not have gone to Joe himself. He's leaving office as one of the most unpopular presidents in history with a failed presidency. It is evocative, should the hostages now be released, this is evocative of the closing days of the Carter administration, where the exact same thing happened, where Iran, realizing that the patsy they were dealing with, Jimmy Carter, would soon be gone, replaced by a much stronger president, Ronald Reagan, released our hostages. I think this is exactly an analogous situation. Trump has made it very clear that if the hostages are not released by the time he becomes president, to quote him, he said, all hell will break loose. I think the Iranians and Hamas and Hezbollah and others controlled and funded by them realize that Donald Trump means business.
Well, and Roger, there was something I wanted to ask you about particularly. I'm seeing with all of Trump's nominees this time, they are prepared in a way that I've never seen nominees prepared to take these hearings on. And I know that you can't reveal anything that you talk about with the president or anything like that, but what can you tell us about the process that goes into preparing for these people, because they seem to be more. Is this just a result of picking people who are more prepared for the job? Did President Trump factor in their appearance on television or their general appearance while doing this? Because these people are coming off as some of the most prepared nominees I've ever seen. I've watched a lot of these hearings over the years, and these people are really standing out.
Well, the greatest single quality that I've seen is the one of restraint. How Pete Hegseth, how Pam Bondi keep their cool while these Democrats act like lunatics and accuse them of everything under the sun is really extraordinary. I thought Hegseth's performance in his hearings was exemplary. He didn't take the bait, although they tried to bait him repeatedly. The idea of Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, a man who lied about serving in Vietnam, did not ever go to Vietnam, did not serve in Vietnam, but ran for the Senate claiming otherwise. Him questioning the military service of Pete Hegseth is an insult to the American people. Da Nang Dick, as they call him back in Connecticut, is truly a disgrace. How Hegseth kept his cool without pointing out the lies by Senator Blumenthal about his own service record. I give him enormous credit for that. I believe Hegseth will be confirmed by the Senate, and that is a big win for Donald Trump. The Senate Minority Leader, the Senate Majority Leader John Thune says he has the votes. Therefore, I have some confidence that that's about to happen. In the meantime, however, very disappointing to see Senator Lindsey Graham announce that he will not support Robert F. Kennedy for the position of Secretary of HHS. While this doesn't surprise me, I think the good news is that Kennedy is well positioned to pick up a few Democrats, such as John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, to offset the loss of the king of the rhinos, Lindsey Graham. But very disappointing news from Senator Graham. But then there's an old saying, what do you expect from a pig but a grunt?
Well, and Roger, I think that I think a lot of people in the Republican circles, and particularly in the media as well, are looking at the defiance of Lindsey Graham and other senators, particularly Lisa Murkowski and others, and they're wondering if Trump will follow through on his promise to primary challenge basically all of these people. I wanted to ask you about Lindsey Graham in particular. What's the relationship like there with the president? You know, I've seen Lindsey Graham at rallies with the president in South Carolina. He's usually booed. It doesn't seem that there's any kind of overlap between their supporters. What can you tell us about the idea of these people being challenged in primaries going forward? Is the president going to follow through on that?
Well, I do think that there'll be grassroots, indigenous beginnings of challenges to various senators who oppose Trump nominees. South Carolina, however, is a very unique situation. South Carolina has what is known as an open primary. That means Democrats and independents, or people in no party, can vote in the Republican primary. That's the only reason Lindsey Graham is still in the U.S. Senate. If South Carolina closed its primary to Republicans only, which is the norm in most states, I don't think Lindsey Graham would win a Republican primary. But he's very popular among liberal Democrats in that state for reasons you can understand. And therefore, I would suggest to you that he may not be able to be defeated in a open Republican primary. Will South Carolina ever move to a closed primary? It is such a long-standing tradition in that state that I think the answer is no, and therefore Lindsey Graham may be invulnerable in a primary. It remains to be seen. Will the president follow through? Look, I think it depends on how some of these senators act between now and then. But if you are, for example, the senator from South Dakota, and you are up for re-election in 2026, and you vote against any of Donald Trump's nominees, well, then you have a death wish. Donald Trump's political death wish. Donald Trump's popularity in South Dakota is probably in the low 90s. Certainly among Republicans it is. So it remains to be seen. but I think the president is building an enormous war chest. I read today that he already has $500 million in his PAC coffers. That's a lot of money, and therefore he certainly is in a position to challenge those Republicans who stand in his way. Something he was not in a position to do in the past. Something he could have done in 2020 but didn't. This is a much wiser Donald Trump that we see today. So I think the possibility of inter-party contests are more substantial.
Well, and Roger, there's something I wanted to ask you particularly about because I saw yesterday we had news that President Trump's official presidential portrait for this term has been released. I believe we have that picture. We can put that up for people to see. Just a striking image. But I did notice that Trump decided to go with a light blue, solid colored tie this time. And he has obviously his traditional blue suit. Now, I went back, Roger, and I pulled his 2016 presidential portrait so that people could see that as well and contrast it. As you see, it's a little bit more zoomed out, a little bit more different. He's got a red tie on there, same blue suit. I wanted to ask you about Trump's choice to go with the blue tie for this. Is there some kind of significance behind that? And what did you think about the portrait overall?
I like the portrait. If you want the truth, I think he looks great. I think his hair looks great, which of course we know matters to him. I think he's he's been through hell. I think his reelection, his sweeping reelection, breaking really, a historic rule only violated once before. Only one other president, Grover Cleveland, a New Yorker, ironically, was elected president. Then defeated in a disputed reelection. His supporters insisted it was stolen from him, and then came back to win again. Only one other president has done that, Cleveland. Now Trump has done it. That is in itself a historic achievement. But his election is more than just a simple election victory. It is a testimony to his personal resilience, his personal persistence, his personal stamina, his personal courage, his personal strength, because he wasn't just defeating a Democrat opponent in an election. He was up against the full power of the U.S. government, which was illegitimately harnessed against him in this tsunami of lawfare. You recently have a tape of Joe Biden actually saying that he is angry with Merrick Garland because he didn't prosecute Trump sooner so that Trump couldn't possibly beat Biden in an election contest. If you needed any proof that these indictments against Donald Trump were all politically motivated, well, there you have it right there. As you know, David Schoen, the criminal defense lawyer who represented Trump in one of the two impeachment trials, was with us earlier in the week. And he made the case that even the New York conviction, which is fatally flawed because this personal settlement of a harassment claim does not hide any underlying crime. There is no crime, and therefore the prosecution should never have been brought. I'm virtually certain, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm virtually certain that that indictment is going to get that charge, or that conviction is going to ultimately get thrown out. So the incredible war of lawfare against Donald Trump, on top of having to raise the money to first win the nomination and then campaign for and win the general election, shows you that Trump is a man of strength, a man whose goodness, honesty, strength, character led him to the highest office in the country. And we are just beginning to make history. This is going to be a golden age of peace, prosperity, security, and justice. I have no doubt about it.
Well, Roger, earlier you mentioned one of the worst members of the U.S. Senate, and that's a man that lied about his military service or his lack of military service. He claimed to be a veteran, and he simply never served in Vietnam. He claimed to have served in Vietnam, and he hadn't, and he got destroyed by Pam Bondi yesterday. She was really they were setting him up, and she was knocking him back. It was pretty amazing to watch. Let's see Da Nang Dick get put in his place by Pam Bondi.
Can you say no to the President of the United States when he asks you to do something unethical or illegal?
Senator, first, I need to clarify something that you said, that I have to sit up here and say these things. No, I don't. I sit up here and speak the truth. I'm not going to sit up here and say anything that I need to say to get confirmed by this body. I don't have to say anything. I will answer the questions to the best of my ability and honestly.
Let me ask you.
It's another example of why she's going to be a great attorney general. This guy's audacity is really quite extraordinary.
Well, and Roger, we talked earlier this week about your preparation to go to the inauguration here, and we talked a little bit about morning dress. And I saw that there was a lot of people talking out there. They wanted to hear more about that, and it kind of was rattling in my head too. I wanted to ask you about it. So you're going to wear this. You've worn this to the inauguration before, and I wanted to ask you, what are the other occasions that you would wear something like this? Would it be like a christening outfit, or it seems like super formal that it would only be used for very certain occasions?
Yeah, it is the morning suit, which is a swallowtail coat, not tails, but a swallowtail coat, a gray or buff colored vest, could be a winged collar, could be a fold over collar. White gloves, striped trousers, really used for diplomatic, traditionally for diplomatic occasions, but also every president, with the exception of George Bush and Donald Trump, in recent years has worn this for their inauguration. That includes, all the way back to Roosevelt, Truman, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Clinton. Interestingly enough, after Bush, Clinton wore that. Then Bush ended the tradition, and Donald Trump, of course, wore his signature red tie. Now, for the inaugural ball, I note that the invitations say black tie, but in fact, the correct dress is white tie and tails, which, of course, nobody but me will be wearing. I am going to be correct in Washington in terms of everything I wear. Now, my critics, and there are plenty of them, will say, oh, Stone looks like a Batman villain. Well, let's take a look at the pictures after the inauguration. I'm picking out what is, based on the etiquette books, the correct outfit for the inaugural. This, I can assure you, Mrs. Stone will look smashing in whatever she wears. But you're right, Troy, we're packing now, trying to figure out what to wear. There are a number of unofficial events, the multicultural ball that Pastor Mark Burns is putting together. There is the Hispanic ball that Kimberly Guilfoyle and I are honorary co-chairman with others. That is, I think, a sold out event at this point. There's a lot of excitement about this. On the other hand, for those who are headed to Washington, well, bring your top coat. We're looking at an extraordinarily cold Washington. They're predicting snow for both Saturday and Sunday, so you may also want to bring your boots.
Well, Roger, we're going to have, we got some slingshot troopers out there. We're going to have them doing the media, covering the events. So we are, we've got them bundled up though. Make sure we've got cold weather gear, and they have plenty of per diem to buy as much coffee, hot chocolate as they need to keep themselves warm. It is going to be a historic inauguration, Roger. And I just flash back real quickly. Just a few years ago, I was sitting in high school watching Trump be inaugurated the first time. I was a junior in high school at the time, and to see what's transpired past that, to have now, entered the media and been covering the Biden administration for the last 4 years, the abuses, the corruption, over the last 4 years, Roger, I think we're kind of just getting out of it. So we're not really going to be, have that perspective yet. But historically, we're going to look back at the last 4 years and say, what an unbelievable time in our country. that so many people stood up when we had COVID lockdowns, that so many people stood up when we had the theft of our 2020 election. And they said that we're going to have a systemic change in this country. We're going to get away from those who hate this country. We're going to get away from those who want to destroy this country. And we're starting to see the tide turn, and it may not go fully in the other direction. There's still a lot of work to be done. But for you to have seen this have transpired, not once, not twice, but 3 times in your lifetime, has to be just tremendous. And you have to feel just so invigorated to be back in the saddle again, Roger. I mean, you have to have that kind of feeling, no?
I'm very happy for the country. I'm very happy for President Trump. I guess the great thing here is that I think we came right to the edge of the end of our constitutional republic as we know it. I do think that there is a globalist cabal that seeks to destroy this country. And there is one man that stands between utter destruction and a prosperous and peaceful future and safe future for the country. And that's Donald Trump, which is why I've said on this show and others that I pray for the president's safety every single day. He's doing this big public rally as part of the inaugural festivities. I think it's in the Capitol Center. While I like the spirit, I'm going to breathe easier once he has control of the Secret Service, once they work for him, once he can ensure his own safety. That continues to be a concern of mine going into the inaugural. I still don't know about the advisability of taking the oath outside in front of millions, but I do know this: Donald Trump is not going to be bullied. He's not going to be cowed. He's not going to hide. He's not going to let his critics or foreign enemies show that he is changing his routine because he's afraid. Because believe me, I've known Donald Trump for 45 years, and he is afraid of nothing. All right, a couple housekeeping things here. Troy, you started a new show here at worldviewtube.com. Tell us about that and when people can see it.
Well, Roger, it's a tremendous show. We're having the opportunity to dig into some of the worst corruption instances we've ever seen in our history. And every show we have about a 15 to 20 minute opening where we talk about different subjects. We talk about some breaking news, and it's really taken off. So I want to thank you for being so kind and letting me promote the show here. It's called Slingshot TV. It's on Worldview Tube before this, but if you look us up on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, any of those, Roger, you will find, you search Slingshot News and you'll see it. There you'll see the show. And we had just yesterday, Roger, I wanted to tell you, we had a TikTok about Andrew Tate taken off. All I said was that I know Andrew Tate to be somebody who is a man of his word, who is a fierce believer in the things that he preaches. And I would not bet against him to make Britain great again. That's literally all I said. And they got the video was taken down for violent extremism. So we're seeing some pushback on some things, but overall, we're doing really well. I want to thank you again for being so kind to us here on the Stone Zone.
I want to remind folks that you can see our show, the Stone Zone, every day at 4 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Eastern, right here at worldviewtube.com. That's worldviewtube.com. But if you miss it there, you can see it at 8 p.m. Eastern at Rumble. I suggest you go to your cell phone, download the Rumble app, go to rumble.com/Roger Stone and follow us there. You see the green follow button, then set yourself a notification so that you don't miss any of the news, history, politics, and everything else we talk about here in the Stone Zone. All right, I'm afraid that's it for us today. We will report to you one more time before we head to Washington for the inauguration. Until tomorrow, God bless you, and thanks for joining us in the Stone Zone. Godspeed.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?